Good evening, everybody. At least it's evening here. Welcome to week 5. We are almost wrapping up our unit on poetry. A few short weeks, we're going to be starting looking at literature. This week, we're going to be looking at love, sex, and desire. Love, we like to think of in, abstract poetry by maybe Shakespeare. Or maybe some of these romantic, gushy love songs that we keep seeming to hear so much on the radio lately. When we talk about sex, obviously we think of, some of these songs that are very explicit. When we think of desire, maybe we think of desiring the opposite sex, etc. I want to challenge you to really think outside the box when we think of love, sex, and desire. And one of the most interesting poems that we can do that with is by this man right here, Cummings. If you understand an author and you understand what they are typically prone to write about, you're pretty much guaranteed to understand just about any of their stories. Like Stephen King writes about horror. Robert A. Heinlein writes science fiction. Emily Dickinson writes a lot of poetry about death. So I'm going to read one of E. Cummings' poems. I'm going to critique it, or rather give you some ideas on it. This was actually my fiance's book, and she actually jotted her notes down in it, so we'll take a look at that. The title of this particular poem is called She Being Brand, and we'll take a look at that in a second. She being brand new, and consequently a little stiff, I was careful of her, and having thoroughly oiled the universal joint, tested my gas, felt of her radiator, made sure her springs were okay. I went right to it, flooded the carburetor, cranked her up, flipped the clutch, and then somehow got into reverse. She kicked. What the hell? Next minute I was back in neutral, tried and again slowly, barely, nudging, my lever right, O, and her gears being an A. I shaped past from low through second into high like greased lightning, just as we turned the corner of Divinity Avenue. I tapped the accelerator and later and give her the juice. Good, and was the first ride, and I believe we was happy to see how nicely she acted right up to the last minute, coming back down by the public gardens. I slammed on the internal expanding and external contracting brakes both at once, and brought all of her trembling to a dead standstill. That may not make any sense to you guys. If you really look at an analysis of E. E. Cummings' poetry, you'll find it's not as innocent as you might think. This is actually a poem, on the surface, maybe talking about breaking in a car. It's really talking about breaking in a virgin. And he's describing the act of sexual intercourse by driving a car. He's not the first person. I don't know if he's the first person to do that. It's possible. But it certainly wasn't the last. If you've ever listened to the song Trampled Underfoot by Led Zeppelin, it does the same thing. So when you were looking at E. E. Cummings' poems, you're going to find he does not use a lot of punctuation, or he uses punctuation in odd places. In the middle of a word, in the middle of a paragraph, in the middle of a sentence. And really, there's a reason for that. You need to figure out what that reason is. This E. E. Cummings poetry is not easy to understand. It's not like the other poem that we're going to be taking a look at by T.S. Eliot, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. An author that was extremely inspired by T.S. Eliot was Stephen King. And the greatest poem that T.S. Eliot wrote, at least in my mind anyways, is this poem called The Wastelands. And in fact, that if you've ever read Stephen King's The Dark Tower series, that is actually the basis of it. The other poem we're going to be looking at is a little bit lighter. It is by Barrett Browning, and it's How Do I Love Thee? And you should probably recognize it right off the bat. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. We've all heard that, I think, at some point, but few of you guys realize it was actually a poem. And the last concept that we really want to take a look at this week is desire. Richard Cory, probably one of the most profound poems that we could read on this topic. It may sound a little bit like the song, what is it, by the Beatles, A Day in the Life. He blew his mind out in a car. He didn't realize the light had changed. You may see some echoes of that. I'm not sure if Paul McCartney or John Lennon actually read this poem, Richard Cory. It is not for the faint of heart. It really makes you think And one of the major words that gets hung up on in rich Corey is the term bread. We went without meat and cursed the bread. What does the term bread mean? What could it mean? There's actually, I think, one, two, three um, possible meanings for that. So you really want to take a look at this. And this is we're wrapping this up, and as we wrap it up, it's going to be getting a little bit more complex because there are some concepts that I've not neglected to, but just pushed aside because I want to make sure everybody's on the same page as far as poetry. Poetry is far more abstract than, say, literature. If we're reading a story by like Ernest Hemingway, Cat in the Rain, it follows through in a logical order. Only when you get into postmodernism do you start seeing more abstract concepts like that you would find in poetry. We're also coming up on the due date for the first draft of your essay. Due, I believe, it's 12. I will be grading those on my honeymoon. Yes, I know. A lot of people ask some questions about essay one. What am I looking for? Well, I try not to give you guys this cookie cutter image of what exactly I'm looking for because I think it stifles the imagination. At the same time, I recognize you guys do need boundaries. I would start off your essay by introducing the poet just a little bit. You don't want to write an biography of the poet. I get a lot of students who do that. After that, you want to introduce the two poems that you're going to be writing about. Understand, if you double space the poems, the poems themselves do not qualify as part of the 1,000-word page length. 1,000 words is generally about 3 to 4 pages. The poems do not count towards that. All right, and I'm a stickler for word count. I really am. So what you're going to do after that, after you introduce the poem, you're going to introduce some concepts that the author explores in these poems, some common theme there. And then you're going to go back and explain why he particularly, or this author, poet, or writer, or musician, chose to use, this particular imagery, this particular tone, maybe this particular word arrangement. What does this song mean? I've often cited the example of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young's song "Ohio." They were deeply, deeply upset by the incident at Kent State, Ohio, in 1970, where 4 students were shot and killed by soldiers. And these people were protesting the war, and basically the song is about how we're on our own. We can't protest. The same goes for John Fogerty's song. You can really dissect that and say, all right, we're talking about a middle class person. This is where he came from. I know a lot about John Fogerty because I studied him extensively. I'm going to have a biography around here somewhere. And his mother was a teacher. Father disappeared. I think there were 3 or 4 brothers. And, it was difficult. And John Fogerty protesting about the fact that, hey, I had to fight. He didn't actually get drafted. He didn't actually go, but I know he was part of the draft, or at least getting trained. So why do I have to go if other people don't have to? So these are concepts that you see a lot throughout many of his songs that talk about war, many of the songs that talk about protest and stuff like that. So when you're looking at your author, you really want to find poems or songs that have a common theme. And find out why. What was it in their childhood that made them, or in their adult years, that really made them think about this? What was it about their lives that they were unhappy with, or they see injustice somewhere? What was that? Right? Then you want to wrap up a little bit by concluding with, what does this poem mean to you? What is it? Why is it applicable? My favorite song is "Born on a Bayou" by QUINCY, because he often talks about the past and wishing for a simpler life, and yeah, I suppose I do that sometimes, not always. I also like the opening to that song. It just absolutely blows my mind. So these are things that you want to think about when you're writing your first essay. Remember, I am looking for at least 2 sources, outside sources, and those sources do not include the poems that you're citing. So basically, you're going to have 4 sources: poem 1, poem 2, and then 2 other sources that are external. Okay. The library is a great source. One of the students here, and God bless her heart, I can't remember her name right now. Unfortunately, it's been a busy day here. You're going to want to check out the library. I will accept sources from the library. The internet, be careful. Anybody who cites Wikipedia automatically gets 5, 10 points off. I'm serious. I hate Wikipedia. It's a no-brainer. You know, you might go there and look at the references section to see where some of the information came from. But it's really pathetic because all your work is pretty much done for you. And I really want you guys to think that part of life. Be careful with your internet sources. Helium.com, I do not accept. About.com, I do not accept. Ask.com, all these types of sites where you can just simply punch in a question and get the detailed answer. I don't accept them. I really don't. And I will point those out when I'm editing the first draft. Okay. So, those of you who are finished with your rough draft, please send it in. Trying to get everything done before I'm going to be in Florida for about a week. So, in a couple of weeks, you will see me broadcasting from there. No, I won't have a margarita in my hand. But anyways. And so what I'll probably do is extend maybe week 1 if I do not get all of those essays done while I'm down there. And I think that's it for now. As always, you know, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, please let me know. I know this has been a long video. Normally I don't do that. But in any event, I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. I'll be taking attendance tomorrow. If you posted this week to Facebook, you're golden. If you're not, you're screwed. Take care. Good night.